In this video, I'm going to show you an easy way to trim out a window. And we're going to do it right now. This is a replacement window that I installed during this bedroom remodel or this bedroom addition, however you want to look at it. But this video should work for pretty much any window that you have. And for this, there's really only two elements. There's the trim that goes right here, butts to the window, and goes flush with the drywall all the way around. And then there's the actual window trim that goes all the way around against the wall. And the type of trim around this that I'm going to be doing is called a picture frame. And the reason they call it a picture frame is because it looks like a picture frame. It just goes all the way around. Another style of window trim that you can do is one that has a sill on the bottom. And that's the kind that I did in the bathroom. I made a video on that. I'll leave a link in the description over to that. It's very detailed. It's not complicated, but it's a little more complicated than this because this type of trim is very easy. First thing I'm going to do is go around the window and measure to see how wide I need this piece to be. This right here looks like 1 7/8, and I'm going to measure that all the way around. And if it's a little tricky to measure, maybe this piece is down further this way and the drywall is up further and you have a gap right here and it's hard to measure, you can use a speed square and hold it against your drywall like this and get a measurement that way. In a perfect world, all of this will be exactly the same, but old houses are not perfect. 1 7/8. That is the same. Check in the middle of the window, making sure that these crusties aren't in my way. 1 7/8. Moving on, down to this corner. And that is about 2 inches. That's about 2 inches. 2 inches. And right in the middle, last measurement, that is about 1 7/8. All of my measurements range from 1 7/8 to 2 inches. So I'm gonna rip these at 1 15 16ths, which is right in between those two measurements. There'll be a 16th off either way. So I'll be able to push the window trim on the outside tight this way if it's bigger, and if it's smaller, I'll be able to push this in and angle it just a little bit. I'm not worried about that 1/8 of an inch difference. Let's say it was off by a 1/4 inch. We'll say the top is measuring at 2 inches and the bottom is measuring at 1 3/4. What I would end up doing is ripping it from 1 3/4 at the bottom to 2 inch and then put a 2 inch piece in here and 1 3/4 piece at the bottom. But I don't have to worry about that. I'm gonna rip it at 1 15 16ths right in between those measurements, and I think we're gonna be good all the way around. So I'm gonna write down 1 15 16ths. That's gonna be my rips for the 4 pieces. What I like to do is measure the exact size of the window. So the width on this is 35.5, and I'm gonna write down 35.5. And you can put these pieces anywhere you want. I just like the way it works out because the pieces are 3/4 of an inch, so you end up with windows like this, the replacement windows, you end up having a 1/4 of an inch distance from this to the actual trim. Same thing for the sides. I'm gonna hook on here on my side measurements at 52 inches. I'll write down 52 inches. Now I have the measurements of the exact size of the window. I know exactly what I want to rip them at. Just be careful if this, say, is at an angle, or if you have any kind of obstructions, you might have to cut these pieces a little shorter than the exact size of the window. In fact, this has a slight angle, so I'm just going to double check those pieces before I go too far after I cut them. But it's better to cut them longer than shorter. And you might also want to raise it up here. It just really depends on the way you want it to look and how you want to do it. So up to you. I'm gonna rip these down first. I have an 8-foot piece of pine. It's pre-primed because I'm gonna be painting this white. I'm gonna set my saw to 1 15 16ths. Safety glasses. Now here's a little mock-up of how the window trim is gonna look. And we're gonna pretend that these are the side pieces and these are the pieces on the top and bottom. These measurements are 52 inches and I'm gonna keep them that way. But with these pieces at the top and bottom, you have to remember that they're going in between these pieces. So I took measurements of the actual window. So from here to here is 35.5. But since these pieces are going in the middle, in between here, I want to take off 1.5 inches because this is 3/4, that's 3/4. So these are actually going to be 34 inches and not 35.5. Now I can cut my pieces to length. First, I'm going to square the ends. 52 inches. 34 inches. Now you can check your pieces, make sure they're gonna work the way you want them to, and that you didn't mess up a measurement somewhere along the line. This is looking good to me. This is gonna go just like this. You wanna check your rip. Let's see how you look here. Again, you can be a little further out this way or a little further in that way, depending on how your window is. And you can always rip it by hand if you want to be completely flush with this, which is ideal, but it's not a huge deal because you can push this trim tight to the wall, cock it in here, and you should be good. But this looks pretty good. Now I'm going to take a nice flat surface like this floor, and I'm going to lay out my pieces as though this is the window. And because your pieces are going to have imperfections in them, you want to put the nicest side towards the inside of the window because let's say, for instance, this is the bottom. I'm going to put my imperfections right here because you're never going to see that. And remember, these are going on the inside of these pieces. This will look good right here. This piece right here. And then the top. Now I'm going to put this right together on the floor with my finish gun. These are 15 gauge nails, and if there's any difference in these pieces, which there shouldn't be, you at least want this to be even right here. This is going to be the inside, and this side is going to be tucked to the window. So I'm going to hold that nice and even. You can add some wood glue here if you wanted to, and very carefully put a couple nails in here. Try and go nice and straight, and watch your fingers. 2 nails. Now you have the option to make this even easier by putting the trim on right now, and then you can just put it into place and nail it in. But I'm going to install this for a reason, and I'll show you why right now. First thing I'm going to do is clean up stuff like this and get that so I don't have an obstruction like this. And I'm going to cut this back with a knife. And anywhere where the drywall is sticking down, like here, it's sticking down a little bit. I have plenty of trim to cover up over here. So I'm just going to cut back any of this drywall that I think might interfere and mess up my reveal right here. And another thing I want to do is, for whatever reason, the way these windows are built, they have this little piece right here, which is kind of annoying because it sticks out just a little bit, and that will hold my trim out and I'll have a gap there. So I'm going to use a chisel and just cut it back just like I did over here. Now I'm just gonna very carefully take a chisel and cut off this little piece right here. It is going to hold me up here. And this looks terrible too. Let me just fix that a little bit. A little better. Okay, at least this won't hold me up now. And it's totally up to you if you want to do this, or this might not even apply to you, but you can see that's how much of a gap there would be. Now it'll be nice and even. So now my trim will go in just like this. I want this to be the same distance from the top to the bottom. But if I just take a nail gun and I shoot a nail in here, that is gonna throw that off. So what I could do, since I'm not putting this piece of trim on, is I can just take some shims and tuck them in here and get this to where it needs to be and shoot a nail. But instead, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take some 1¼ drywall screws and I'm just gonna screw them in right here. And I'm gonna make sure they line up exactly with the size of the window, because remember, I cut all my pieces to that size. And then when I put my piece in there, it'll be acting as a shim, and I can put a nail in here. And I could, like I said, use shims, but what I am gonna do is I'm gonna take advantage of this gap right here and insulate it. And putting these screws in is a good way to do this if you already put the trim on and did it the super easy way, and then you wouldn't have to worry about this going in and out and this reveal changing as you go around the window. So I'm gonna do that because that's just easier, and I can pack a lot more insulation around this screw than I can some shims. So I'm gonna put a couple screws like this around this entire window, and I can put my piece in and make sure it's good before I nail it and adjust them in or out. Okay, little adjusting, and looks like we're all set. We have a nice gap all the way around so that I can get insulation in there. And this is a good example right here of the issue. So this board bows out a little bit, but once I push it this way, it'll hit those screws and give me a nice even reveal right there, just like at the top and on the bottom. I got some screws down here supporting this. Again, you can use shims if you want, if you don't think screws are going to be enough, but this isn't a big enough sill for someone to be sitting on or putting too much pressure on. And I left it away from the handle so I don't have an issue opening that. So now all I have to do is make sure I'm tight against here and tight against those screws and put some nails in right here all the way around this trim. I have also not used shims, not used screws, and I've put the trim on before I attach this, and I just put it into place, and I can kind of move the piece over and nail it, and it'll be in the exact right location where I need it to be, and I nail this trim, and it stays where it needs to be. And then I like to caulk this in right here instead of using window stop, which you can use, but I like how it looks if you just caulk this in and make it look like part of the window basically. But what I've seen in the past from not using shims and not using screws like this to get this nice and tight, that allows this to move around more, and eventually the caulking will crack, you'll have a gap here, and it'll look terrible. That's gonna happen regardless with the changes of the temperature and the humidity levels, especially since this is a vinyl window. This is wood, it's gonna expand and contract. You might have some issues with this anyways, but at least doing it this way will help to avoid that. Make sure that's tight against the window. Try not to shoot into the screw. Like a hardware sandwich. Now I can take some insulation and get a little bit more in here. Tuck it right in there with my taping knife. In case you didn't know, I am not a huge fan of spray foam. But if you're doing this and you like spray foam, feel free to use it. Okay, I got all my insulation tucked in here. So now I'm gonna take a combination square like this, and I'm gonna set it to the size that I want this reveal right here, from the trim to here. And I'm gonna put it like this and take a really sharp pencil and make marks like this all the way around this trim. And that's gonna tell me where to put my window casing right here. Now we're ready for window trim, and I'm using this. It's called colonial casing, but this is going to be the same for whatever type of window casing you're using. I like to start with the bottom piece, so I'm going to hold it right here and make my marks. So over here, I'm going to make a mark right at this line, and then I know that the 45 is going to go like this. So as Tom Silva would say, you got to mark the orientation like this, so you know, and then do the same thing on the other side. Mark right here, and go like that, and we can go cut this. My saw set to 45, line this up and cut it. I cut it a little short on the first mark, so I cut it a little long on this mark. It should be good now. Okay. I'm going to hold this here, make sure I'm good. Hold it on the lines, looking good. I can put some pin nails in. An 18 gauge nailer. Find my line here, put one in the middle, and one at the end. Looking good, and I have a nice even reveal all the way down. Now for the two side pieces, I like to cut the 45s for the bottom and cut these at the same time. That'll save me a trip up and down the stairs. So I'm just gonna hold it to where this is good on the bottom. The 45 looks good. I'm on the line, right where I need to be. And then I can mark the top here the same way I just did down here. Right on that line. And then mark it. The same thing on this side. Mark the orientation. I can cut those. So I've checked this piece out and made sure that it works at the bottom and at the top. And I'm going to attach it here first. I'm going to use a little wood glue. Now, I'm not going to worry about how it looks up top yet. I want to make sure this 45 goes together nice. And then once it's attached, I can start moving the trim to where it needs to be up top. I'm going to put one nail right here. And then I'm going to get this to where it looks good. It's nice and even. Put a little pressure on it by spinning it. Try and get some nails in here very carefully. Ah! No! And that is something that happens that really stinks. I guess I'll show you how to fix that. see if I can get a nail in here without doing that again. There. Now that 45 is nice and tight. Let me show you how to fix that. So I'm just going to take some needle nose pliers and bend this until it breaks, like that. Make sure this is cleared out. And this is small enough so that I can just take whatever I'm going to use for the nail holes and fill this in. And since it's a little bigger, I might let that dry a little bit, put another coat on it and sand it. But that happens. It depends on the grain of the wood and how you're shooting this nail. That can always happen. And if you really want to, you can change this piece out. But once this is all set, it's caulked in and painted, you'll never be able to tell. So right now, this is what the piece of trim looks like at the top. And it gradually goes down to looking correct on the bottom. So what I'm gonna do is work my way up because I don't wanna put too much pressure on this. I'm just gonna put a nail here and then I'll pull this trim this way a little bit, put a nail here, and so on until I get to the top. That way it won't mess up that 45 down there, because if I just tried to pull that over right now, I could pull the nails out and just make a mess of this 45 down here. So I'm gonna gradually nail it as I go up. And another thing I can do is just get a couple nails in here so it stays in place. That, but I'm just gonna do it in this corner until I nail everything off with the pin nailer. So just move this over a little bit. Nail right here. More at the top. Hey, now I can do that same thing for the other side. Let's try not to have a repeat of the other side. Good. Use a wet rag to get that wood glue out of there. Now I need to do this top piece. It's gonna go like this, and instead of trying to mark it like this or take a measurement, I like to flip it like this and then mark it right here and mark it right here. And then remember, mark your orientation. So it's going to go like this. Same thing over here. And then when you cut this, remember that it's the outside of this trim. So you want to cut this line right off because you want it to sit in this trim and not on the outside, if that makes any sense. I'll go cut this. Now we can do this piece. Make sure it's good before we nail it in there. Glue it up. Watch the thumb. And over here, I'm gonna pull it down tight. And I can put some finish nails all around the outside. Try and hit studs, something solid. So now I can just fill the nail holes, caulk it, paint it, and move on. I hope this video helped you if you needed to do a picture frame window like this. Again, if you need to do one with a sill, I have a video for that. I'll leave a link in the description over that. And if you want to see more videos like this, you can click hereish and check those out. And if you haven't subscribed yet, definitely consider it for more home repair videos. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.